The marble floors of Ashford Hall gleamed beneath the crystal chandeliers as Lady Isabella Hartwell stood frozen, her silk gown suddenly feeling like chains. The man she had loved for 3 years, Duke Edmund Ashford, was reading aloud a document that would shatter her world. "This marriage," he declared coldly, "was built on deception. You claimed noble blood, yet you possess nothing." Around them, 200 guests gasped in unison. Isabella's hands trembled as Edmund turned to the radiant Charlotte Pemberton, her own cousin, and announced, "This is the woman worthy of the Ashford name." But what none of them knew, not Edmund, not Charlotte, not a single soul in that glittering ballroom, was that the poor girl they were casting aside was about to receive a visitor who would make every duke in England kneel. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments from which part of the world you're listening to this story. I want to know how far it has traveled. Isabella Hartwell had learned to walk silently through the vast corridors of Ashford Hall, her footsteps barely disturbing the ancient stillness that permeated the Duke's ancestral home. For 3 years, she had been the Duchess of Ashford, though she had never quite felt she belonged within these imposing stone walls that stretched toward the grey English sky. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of her private sitting room, casting long shadows across the Persian rugs and mahogany furniture. Isabella sat at her writing desk, penning yet another letter to the orphanage in London that she secretly supported with her modest allowance. Her chestnut hair was arranged in the simple style she preferred, and her grey eyes reflected a quiet intelligence that few in society bothered to notice. "You're writing to those common children again," came the sharp voice of Charlotte Pemberton, Isabella's cousin, who swept into the room without knocking. Charlotte's golden curls bounced with each step, her emerald dress cut in the latest fashion from Paris. "Really, Isabella, it's quite beneath a duchess to concern herself with street urchins." Isabella set down her pen carefully. "They're children, Charlotte. They deserve kindness. They deserve to know their place," Charlotte corrected, examining her reflection in the ornate mirror above the fireplace. "Just as you should know yours, though I suppose that's difficult when one comes from such humble origins." The barb was familiar. Isabella had been raised by her aunt after her parents' deaths when she was merely 5 years old. She had been told they were minor gentry who had fallen on hard times, leaving her with nothing but a small locket and her name. Her aunt had been cold but dutiful, ensuring Isabella received an education suitable for a gentleman's daughter, if nothing more. Her marriage to Duke Edmund Ashford had been arranged by distant relatives, a match that surprised everyone in society. Edmund was considered one of England's most eligible bachelors, wealthy, titled, and devastatingly handsome, with his dark hair and piercing blue eyes. Isabella had dared to hope that affection might grow between them, that the quiet conversations they shared during their brief courtship might blossom into something deeper. But 3 years had taught her otherwise. Edmund was unfailingly polite, even kind in his distant way, but he had never looked at her with warmth. He fulfilled his duties as a husband in the most perfunctory manner, spending his days managing his estates and his evenings at his club. Isabella existed in his life like a piece of furniture, necessary perhaps, but unremarkable. "Edmund has requested your presence in the drawing room," Charlotte announced, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He has important matters to discuss. I do hope you'll wear something more suitable than that dreadful grey dress. Though I suppose it matches your disposition." Isabella watched her cousin leave, feeling the familiar weight of inadequacy settle over her shoulders. She moved to her wardrobe and selected a gown of deep blue silk, one of the few extravagances she had allowed herself. As her lady's maid helped her dress, Isabella studied her reflection. She was not a beauty like Charlotte, but neither was she plain. Her features were delicate, her figure slender, her bearing graceful. Yet somehow she always felt invisible. The drawing room was filled with afternoon light when Isabella entered, Edmund stood by the windows, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. Beside him stood his mother, the Dowager Duchess, a formidable woman whose disapproval of Isabella had never been concealed. "Isabella," Edmund began, his voice formal, "please sit." She lowered herself onto the settee, her hands folded carefully in her lap. Something in the atmosphere made her pulse quicken with apprehension. "We have received an invitation," the Dowager Duchess announced, her tone clipped. "Lord Pemberton is hosting a grand ball at his estate in 3 weeks' time. All of society will be in attendance. It will be an opportunity to reaffirm certain alliances." Edmund cleared his throat. "Mother believes it's time we made a more prominent appearance in society. Our marriage has been quiet, perhaps too quiet." Isabella felt a flutter of hope. "I would be honored to attend with you, Edmund." "Yes, well." He turned away, gazing out at the manicured gardens. "There are expectations, Isabella. As my Duchess, you represent the Ashford name. You must comport yourself with appropriate dignity and grace." "I have always endeavored to do so," Isabella replied softly, though the words stung. When had she ever brought shame to his name? The Dowager Duchess sniffed. "We shall see. Charlotte will be there, of course. She has become quite the diamond of society, so accomplished, so refined, a true example of noble breeding." Isabella understood the implication. Charlotte, who shared her bloodline, had somehow emerged as everything Isabella was not. It was a comparison that had haunted her entire life. As she left the drawing room, Isabella felt the walls of Ashford Hall closing in around her. She was a duchess, yes, but she was also a prisoner in a golden cage, forever trying to prove herself worthy of a position she had never asked for and a man who would never love her. That evening, as she sat alone in her chambers, Isabella opened the locket she always wore, the only possession from her parents. Inside were 2 miniature portraits, their faces worn with time, but still visible. Her mother's eyes, so like her own, seemed to hold secrets. Her father's strong features spoke of a dignity Isabella had always tried to emulate. "Who were you?" she whispered to the painted faces. "Why did you leave me with nothing but questions?" Outside her window, storm clouds gathered over the English countryside, and Isabella could not shake the feeling that the approaching ball would change everything. She did not know how right she was, nor how devastating that change would be. The Pemberton estate blazed with 1,000 candles on the night of the ball, its Georgian facade transformed into a palace of light and music. Carriages lined the sweeping drive, depositing England's finest families onto the marble steps, where liveried footmen waited to receive them. Isabella descended from the Ashford carriage on Edmund's arm, her heart beating rapidly beneath her corset. She had taken special care with her appearance tonight, wearing a gown of ivory silk embroidered with silver thread, her hair arranged in an elegant chignon adorned with pearls. For once, she had allowed herself to hope that Edmund might look at her with approval, perhaps even pride. But Edmund's attention was elsewhere, his gaze scanning the crowd with an intensity that made Isabella uneasy. The Dowager Duchess had travelled separately, already inside holding court among the matrons of society. The ballroom was a spectacle of wealth and privilege. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the polished floor, where couples waltzed to the orchestra's sweeping melodies. Silk gowns in every colour swirled like flowers in a garden, and the air was thick with perfume, champagne, and the murmur of aristocratic conversation. "Isabella, darling." Charlotte appeared in a gown of crimson satin that clung to her curves, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. "How lovely you look. So simple, quite refreshing, really, in contrast to those of us who must bear the burden of excessive adornment." Before Isabella could respond, Charlotte had linked arms with Edmund. "Your Grace, you promised me the first waltz. Surely you haven't forgotten?" Edmund's expression softened in a way Isabella had never seen directed at herself. "Of course not, Miss Pemberton. I never forget a promise made to you." Isabella stood alone as they swept onto the dance floor, watching her husband and her cousin move together with a synchronicity that spoke of practice, of familiarity, of something that made her stomach twist with dread. Around her, she could feel the eyes of society watching, the whispers beginning like a gathering storm. "Poor thing," she heard Lady Ashworth murmur to her companion. "She must know she's merely a placeholder. Everyone can see where the Duke's true affections lie." "I heard she brought nothing to the marriage," another voice added. "No dowry, no connections, no breeding. One wonders how she secured such a match in the first place." Isabella forced herself to smile, to nod graciously at acquaintances, to pretend her world wasn't crumbling around her. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing footman and retreated to the edge of the ballroom, seeking shadows. The evening progressed with agonizing slowness. Edmund danced with Charlotte 3 times, a shocking breach of propriety that set tongues wagging furiously. He danced with his mother once, with several other ladies of rank, but not once did he approach his own wife. Isabella stood like a ghost at her own social execution, watching the man she had tried so hard to please make a public spectacle of his indifference. It was near midnight when Lord Pemberton called for silence. The orchestra ceased playing, and the crowd gathered in a great circle around the center of the ballroom. Isabella felt a cold dread settle in her bones as Edmund stepped forward, Charlotte at his side, both of them positioned as if for an announcement. "My dear friends," Lord Pemberton began, his voice carrying across the hushed assembly, "we are gathered tonight not merely for celebration, but for truth. For 3 years, a deception has been perpetrated upon one of England's noblest families. Tonight that deception ends." Isabella's vision blurred at the edges. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not like this. Edmund's voice rang out, cold and formal. "I married in good faith, believing I was uniting myself with a woman of appropriate birth and breeding. I was led to believe that Lady Isabella Hartwell descended from the Hartwell family of Somerset, a respectable, if minor, noble line." He paused, and in that silence, Isabella heard the death knell of her life as she knew it. "I have recently discovered," Edmund continued, producing a sheaf of papers, "that this was a fabrication. The Hartwell family of Somerset died out 2 generations ago. Isabella's parents were not gentry at all, but common merchants who assumed the Hartwell name to elevate their station. She brought no noble blood to our union, no dowry, no legitimate claim to the title of Duchess. She is, in essence, an impostor who has deceived us all." The ballroom erupted in gasps and scandalized whispers. Isabella stood frozen, her champagne glass slipping from nerveless fingers to shatter on the marble floor. The sound seemed impossibly loud in her ears. "That's not true," she whispered, but her voice was lost in the chaos. "I didn't know. I was told—" "You were told lies," the Dowager Duchess proclaimed, stepping forward with triumphant malice. "Lies you perpetuated to trap my son into an unsuitable marriage. You have disgraced the Ashford name and betrayed the trust of everyone in this room." Charlotte moved closer to Edmund, her hand resting possessively on his arm. "How terrible this must be for you, Your Grace, to discover you've been shackled to such a creature. But there are remedies, are there not? Annulments for marriages based on fraud?" Edmund's blue eyes finally met Isabella's, and in them she saw not anger, but cold calculation. This had been planned, orchestrated, a public execution designed to free him from a marriage he had never wanted. "I am filing for annulment," Edmund announced, "on the grounds of fraudulent misrepresentation. Isabella Hartwell, or whatever her true name may be, is no longer my wife, no longer the Duchess of Ashford, no longer welcome in society. She will leave this house tonight with nothing, as she brought nothing but lies." Isabella felt the room spinning. Faces swam before her, some shocked, some gleeful, all of them judging. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that she had been as deceived as anyone, that she had never claimed to be anything more than what she was told she was. But her voice had abandoned her. Her strength, draining away like water through cupped hands. "I have already secured the appropriate legal documents," Edmund continued. "They require only my signature. As for the position of Duchess," he turned to Charlotte, and Isabella saw the future written in that single glance. "That honor will soon belong to someone truly worthy of it." Charlotte's smile was radiant with victory. "Oh, Edmund, you honor me beyond measure." Isabella's legs finally moved, carrying her backward, away from the circle of accusers, away from the husband who had never loved her, away from the life that had been stripped from her in front of England's elite. She stumbled toward the doors, her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall in front of these vultures. Behind her, the whispers rose to a roar. She heard her name, or the name she had believed was hers, torn apart by hundreds of voices. She heard Charlotte's laughter, bright and cruel. She heard Edmund's cold voice, giving orders for her belongings to be removed from Ashford Hall. Isabella burst through the ballroom doors and into the cool night air, her breath coming in ragged gasps. A footman approached, but she waved him away, stumbling down the steps toward the gardens. She needed darkness, needed solitude, needed to understand how her entire existence had been obliterated in the space of 10 minutes. She collapsed onto a stone bench hidden among the roses, finally allowing the tears to come. They fell silently, streaming down her face as she clutched the locket at her throat, the only thing she had left of parents who might not have even been her parents, of a past that might have been entirely fabricated. "Who am I?" she whispered into the darkness. "If I'm not Isabella Hartwell, if I'm not the Duchess of Ashford, then who am I?" The roses offered no answer, and the distant music from the ballroom mocked her with its gaiety. Inside, society was celebrating her destruction. Outside, she sat alone, a woman without a name, without a home, without a future. But in her locket, her mother's painted eyes seemed to hold a secret, and somewhere in the darkness wheels were already turning that would transform this night of humiliation into something no one in that ballroom could possibly imagine. The morning after the ball, Isabella found herself standing on the doorstep of a townhouse in Bloomsbury, clutching a single carpet bag containing the few personal items she had been permitted to take from Ashford Hall. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 60s, with silver hair, sharp green eyes, and an expression that softened immediately upon seeing Isabella's tear-stained face. "Good heavens, child!" Aunt Agatha Thornbury exclaimed, pulling Isabella inside. "I heard what happened. The whole city is ablaze with gossip. Come in before the neighbors start their chattering." Agatha Thornbury was Isabella's late mother's sister, or so Isabella had always been told, though now she questioned everything about her past. Agatha had never married, choosing instead a life of independence that scandalized polite society. She wrote essays on social reform under a male pseudonym, hosted salons for intellectuals and artists, and cared not one whit for the opinions of the aristocracy. "I didn't know where else to go," Isabella whispered, as Agatha led her to a cozy sitting room filled with books and paintings. "Everything I believed about myself was a lie." Agatha poured tea with steady hands. "Was it? Or was it simply incomplete truth? Sit down, Isabella. We need to talk about your parents." Over the next hour, Agatha revealed what she knew. Isabella's father had indeed been a merchant, but not a common one. He had been a brilliant trader who had built a fortune through intelligence and integrity, earning respect even from those who looked down on commerce. Her mother had been a gentleman's daughter who had married for love rather than position, accepting social exile for the sake of her heart. "They were good people," Agatha said firmly. "They gave you the Hartwell name because it was your mother's maiden name, and it was rightfully yours. They never claimed nobility, Isabella. That fiction was created by the relatives who arranged your marriage, who saw an opportunity to elevate themselves by connecting you to the Ashford family. You were as much a victim of their deception as Edmund was." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Isabella asked, her voice breaking. "Why let me walk into that marriage, believing I was something I wasn't?" Agatha's expression grew pained. Because I was traveling in Italy when the arrangements were made. By the time I returned, you were already married. I hoped Edmund would come to value you for yourself, not your pedigree. I was wrong. I should have intervened." Isabella set down her teacup, her hands trembling. "What do I do now? I have no name, no position, no future. Society will never accept me again." "Society," Agatha said with a snort, "is a collection of small-minded individuals who measure worth by accidents of birth rather than character. You don't need their acceptance, Isabella. You need to discover who you truly are, separate from titles and expectations, and I'm going to help you do exactly that." Over the following weeks, Isabella began a transformation she had never imagined possible. Agatha introduced her to a world far removed from aristocratic ballrooms, a world of writers, philosophers, physicians and reformers who gathered in Agatha's parlor to debate ideas and challenge conventions. It was at one of these gatherings that Isabella met Dr. Nathaniel Reed, a physician who had recently returned from studying in Edinburgh. He was tall and lean, with warm brown eyes and an earnest manner that put people at ease. Unlike the aristocrats Isabella had known, Nathaniel seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts rather than her pedigree. "Miss Hartwell," he said, bowing over her hand, "Agatha tells me you've been supporting an orphanage in Whitechapel. I've been volunteering there as well, providing medical care to the children. Perhaps we might discuss how to expand their services." For the first time in weeks, Isabella felt a spark of genuine interest. "I would like that very much, Dr. Reed. The children deserve far better than what society currently provides them." Their conversation flowed easily, touching on education reform, public health, and the responsibilities of those with means toward those without. Nathaniel spoke with passion about his work among London's poor, about his belief that every person, regardless of birth, deserved access to medical care and opportunity. "You have a remarkable mind," Nathaniel said, as the evening drew to a close. "It's refreshing to meet someone who thinks beyond social niceties to actual solutions." Isabella felt warmth spread through her chest. Not the desperate hope she had felt with Edmund, but something steadier, more genuine. "Thank you, Dr. Reed. That may be the kindest thing anyone has said to me in years." As weeks turned into months, Isabella found herself drawn deeper into this new world. She began writing articles for reform journals under Agatha's guidance, her natural intelligence and compassion finding expression in words that moved readers. She spent her days at the orphanage, working alongside Nathaniel to improve conditions for the children. She attended lectures at the Royal Society, debates at political clubs, and gradually built a life based on purpose rather than position. But London society had not forgotten her. The scandal of the false Duchess continued to circulate, and Isabella occasionally glimpsed familiar faces on the street, faces that would turn away in disgust or whisper behind gloved hands. She heard that Edmund's annulment had been granted, that he was courting Charlotte openly, that their wedding was being planned for the spring. Each piece of news was a small knife to her heart, not because she still loved Edmund. She was beginning to realize she never truly had, but because it reminded her of how thoroughly she had been discarded. "You're brooding again," Nathaniel observed one afternoon as they walked through the orphanage courtyard. "I can always tell. Your eyes get that faraway look." Isabella managed a small smile. "I was thinking about how strange life is. 6 months ago, I was a duchess living in a mansion. Now I'm a woman of uncertain parentage, living in my aunt's townhouse. Yet somehow, I feel more myself than I ever did at Ashford Hall." Nathaniel stopped walking, turning to face her. "That's because you're finally free to be yourself, Isabella. Not a duchess, not a decoration, but a woman of intelligence and compassion who makes a real difference in the world. That's worth more than any title." "Is it?" Isabella asked softly. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm fooling myself, pretending this life is enough when society has made it clear I'm worth nothing." "Society," Nathaniel said firmly, "is wrong. You are worth everything to the children whose lives you've improved, to the readers who find hope in your words, to the people who know your true character, and—" he hesitated, then continued with quiet intensity, "you are worth everything to me." Isabella's breath caught. She searched Nathaniel's face and saw there what she had never seen in Edmund's: genuine admiration, respect, and the beginning of something deeper. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted at the orphanage gates. A fine carriage had pulled up, and from it emerged a figure that made Isabella's blood run cold. Charlotte Pemberton, dressed in the height of fashion, swept into the courtyard with the Dowager Duchess at her side. "How touching," Charlotte drawled, her eyes taking in Isabella's simple dress and the modest surroundings, the fallen Duchess playing at charity. "Tell me, Isabella, do the children know they're being helped by a fraud and a liar?" Isabella lifted her chin, finding strength she hadn't known she possessed. "They know they're being helped by someone who cares about their welfare more than social position. What brings you here, Charlotte? Surely you didn't come all this way simply to insult me." "We came," the Dowager Duchess announced, "to ensure you understand your place. Edmund and Charlotte will be married next month at Westminster Abbey. It will be the social event of the season. We wanted you to hear it directly, so you don't harbor any foolish hopes of reclaiming what you never truly had." Nathaniel stepped closer to Isabella, his presence supportive. "I think you've delivered your message. Perhaps you should leave." Charlotte's eyes narrowed as she assessed Nathaniel. "And who is this? Your new protector? How far you've fallen, Isabella, from a duke to a common physician. Though I suppose it's appropriate, common people belong with common people. Dr. Reed," Isabella said clearly, "is worth 10 of any aristocrat I've ever met. He saves lives while people like you concern yourselves with gossip and cruelty. Now please leave. You're frightening the children." For a moment Charlotte's mask of superiority slipped, revealing something ugly beneath. Then she smiled coldly. "Enjoy your little fantasy, Isabella. But remember, you'll always be the woman who was cast out, the fraud who deceived society. That shame will follow you forever." As the carriage pulled away, Isabella felt Nathaniel's hand gently touch her shoulder. "Are you all right?" "I am," Isabella said, surprised to find it was true. "For the first time, I think I truly am. They can't hurt me anymore, Nathaniel. I found something real here, something they'll never understand." That evening, as Isabella sat in Agatha's parlour, her aunt handed her a letter that had arrived by special courier. The seal was unfamiliar, bearing a crest Isabella didn't recognize. With trembling fingers, she broke the wax and began to read. The words on the page would change everything once more, but this time the change would not break her. This time she would rise. The letter had come from a solicitor's firm in London, requesting Isabella's presence for a matter of utmost importance regarding your late parents' estate. For 3 days, Isabella had stared at those words, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears. Finally, with Nathaniel and Agatha accompanying her for support, she presented herself at the offices of Whitmore and Associates. Mr. Whitmore was an elderly gentleman with kind eyes and an air of barely contained excitement. "Miss Hartwell," he began, then corrected himself. "Or perhaps I should say, Your Imperial Highness?" Isabella felt the room tilt. "I beg your pardon." "Your father," Mr. Whitmore explained, opening a leather portfolio, "was not merely a merchant. He was Prince Leopold of Valdoria, a small but wealthy principality in Central Europe. He renounced his title and fled to England 28 years ago after a political coup threatened his life. Your mother was indeed English gentry. They lived quietly under assumed names to protect you from those who might use you as a political pawn." Agatha gasped. "I knew Leopold had secrets, but I never imagined—" "The political situation in Valdoria has stabilized," Mr. Whitmore continued. "Your father's brother, Emperor Frederick, has been searching for you for years. He has no children of his own, and you, Miss Hartwell, are his legitimate heir. You are a princess of the imperial blood, and your uncle wishes to acknowledge you publicly. Isabella couldn't breathe. This is impossible. I'm nobody. You are Princess Isabella Leopoldine of Valdoria, Mr. Whitmore said firmly. And your uncle, the Emperor, is currently en route to London. He wishes to meet you and, if you're willing, to restore you to your rightful position. The documents are all here. Birth certificates, marriage records, royal decrees. Everything has been verified. The implications crashed over Isabella like a wave. She wasn't a fraud. She wasn't common. She was, in fact, of far higher rank than Edmund or any of the English aristocrats who had scorned her. The irony was almost too much to bear. "What does this mean?" she asked quietly. "What happens now?" "That," Mr. Whitmore said with a smile, "is entirely up to you, Your Highness." News of Isabella's true identity spread through London society like wildfire. Within a week, the woman who had been cast out as a fraud was revealed to be royalty of a rank that made English dukes look like country squires. The same drawing rooms that had whispered about her disgrace now buzzed with frantic speculation about how to regain her favour. Emperor Frederick arrived in London with appropriate ceremony, taking up residence at Claridge's Hotel. He was a distinguished man in his 60s, with Isabella's grey eyes and a warmth that immediately put her at ease. Their first meeting was emotional, with Frederick embracing his long-lost niece and apologizing for the years she had spent in ignorance of her heritage. "Your father wanted to protect you," Frederick explained. "He made me promise not to search for you until the political situation was stable. By the time I could safely do so, you had married and seemed settled. I thought perhaps you were happy. When I heard of the annulment," his expression darkened, "I came as quickly as I could." "I don't know how to be a princess," Isabella admitted. "I barely knew how to be a duchess." Frederick smiled. "You be yourself, my dear. That's all any of us can do. But perhaps you'll allow me to introduce you properly to society, to show these English aristocrats that they gravely misjudged you." And so, 6 months after her public humiliation, Isabella prepared to re-enter society, not as a disgraced duchess, but as an imperial princess. The venue was the Ashworth Ball, one of the season's most prestigious events. Everyone who mattered would be there, including Edmund and Charlotte, whose wedding was now just 2 weeks away. Isabella dressed with care in a gown of deep sapphire silk, cut in the continental style and adorned with diamonds that had belonged to her grandmother. Her hair was arranged in an elegant style befitting her rank, and around her neck she wore the imperial insignia of Valdoria. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself, not because she looked different, but because she finally looked like who she truly was. Nathaniel arrived to escort her, looking handsome in formal evening wear. Over the past months, their friendship had deepened into something neither of them had named, but both understood. He bowed formally. "Your Highness, you are breathtaking." "I'm still just Isabella," she said softly. "The same woman who helps at the orphanage and writes reform articles." "No," Nathaniel corrected gently. "You're Isabella, who happens to be a princess. There's a difference. The title doesn't change who you are. It simply reveals what was always there." The Ashworth Ball was in full swing when Isabella arrived on her uncle's arm, with Nathaniel following at a respectful distance. The majordomo's announcement silenced the ballroom instantly. His Imperial Majesty Emperor Frederick of Valdoria and Her Imperial Highness Princess Isabella Leopoldine of Valdoria. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. Isabella felt hundreds of eyes on her as she descended the stairs, her bearing regal, her expression serene. She saw shock, disbelief, and dawning horror on the faces of those who had mocked her. And there, near the center of the ballroom, stood Edmund and Charlotte. Edmund's face had gone pale, his blue eyes wide with something that might have been regret or simply calculation. Charlotte looked as if she might faint, her hand clutching Edmund's arm with white-knuckled desperation. "Your Majesty, Your Highness," Lady Ashworth gushed, rushing forward. "What an unexpected honor! We had no idea, that is, we would never have—" Would never have what? Emperor Frederick asked coolly. Would never have treated my niece with such contempt had you known her rank. How telling about your character, Lady Ashworth. The rebuke was delivered with perfect politeness, but its sting was unmistakable. Lady Ashworth retreated, her face crimson. As the evening progressed, Isabella found herself surrounded by the same people who had whispered about her disgrace. Now they competed for her attention, offering apologies and excuses, trying desperately to repair the damage they had done. She accepted their groveling with grace, but without warmth, her true attention reserved for those who had stood by her, Agatha, Nathaniel, and the few genuine friends she had made in her months of exile. It was inevitable that she would come face to face with Edmund. He approached with Charlotte at his side, both of them looking as if they were walking to their execution. "Your Highness," Edmund began, his voice strained, "I must offer my most sincere apologies. Had you known my rank," Isabella interrupted quietly, "you would have treated me differently, but my character, my intelligence, my compassion, those were the same whether I was a princess or a merchant's daughter. You judged me unworthy, not because of who I was, but because of what you believed I lacked. That tells me everything I need to know about your character, Edmund." Charlotte's face twisted with desperation. "You must understand, Isabella, we were deceived as well. The information we received was an excuse for cruelty," Isabella finished. "You humiliated me publicly, Charlotte, not because you believed I had deceived anyone, but because you wanted Edmund for yourself. You saw an opportunity and you took it, regardless of the pain you caused. I hope the dukedom brings you the happiness you sacrificed your conscience to obtain." "Isabella," Edmund said, and for the first time she heard genuine emotion in his voice. "I was wrong, terribly wrong. If there's any way I could make amends—" "There isn't," Isabella said simply. "You made your choice, Edmund. You chose to believe the worst of me, to cast me aside without even asking for my side of the story. You chose Charlotte and her connections over the woman you had sworn to honor. Those choices have consequences." She turned to leave, but Edmund caught her hand. "If I had known, if I had understood, I would never have let you go." Isabella looked at him. This man she had once tried so hard to please and felt nothing but pity. "Yes, you would have, Edmund, because you never valued me for myself. You would have kept me as a princess, but you discarded me as a woman. That's the tragedy. Not that you lost a princess, but that you never recognized the worth of the person you had." She withdrew her hand and walked away, feeling lighter with each step. Behind her, she heard Charlotte's sharp whisper, "She's bluffing. She must be. This can't be real." But it was real, and everyone in that ballroom knew it. The woman they had scorned was now far above them in rank and dignity. The duchess they had mocked was an imperial princess, and the man who had cast her aside had just realized the magnitude of his mistake. Nathaniel appeared at Isabella's side, offering his arm. "Shall we dance, Your Highness?" Isabella smiled, genuine and warm. "I would be delighted, Dr. Reed." As they waltzed across the floor, Isabella caught sight of her reflection in the ballroom mirrors. She saw a woman who had been broken and rebuilt, who had lost everything and found herself, who had been cast down and risen higher than before. She saw, finally, who she truly was. And in Nathaniel's eyes, she saw a future that had nothing to do with titles or rank, but everything to do with love, respect, and genuine partnership. The kind of future she had always deserved, but never dared to dream possible. The music swelled, and Isabella let herself be carried by it, knowing that this was not an ending, but a beginning. The morning after the Ashworth ball, London society woke to find itself in chaos. Calling cards piled up at Claridge's hotel, each bearing desperate messages of apology and requests for audiences with Princess Isabella. The same families who had shunned her now competed for her attention with an enthusiasm that would have been comical, if it weren't so transparently self-serving. Isabella sat in her uncle's suite, reviewing the cards with Agatha. The Dowager Duchess of Ashford requests the honor of calling upon your highness to express her deepest regrets, Isabella read aloud, then set the card aside. How quickly allegiances shift when rank is revealed. Will you receive any of them? Agatha asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Only those who showed me kindness when I had nothing, Isabella replied. The rest can keep their regrets. I have no interest in relationships built on my title, rather than my character. Emperor Frederick entered the room, followed by his private secretary. My dear, we need to discuss your future. I know this has all been overwhelming, but decisions must be made. Isabella set down the calling cards. What kind of decisions? Your position in Valdoria, for one, Frederick explained, settling into a chair. As my heir, you have responsibilities to our people. I would like you to return with me, to learn about your heritage, and eventually take your place in the imperial court. However, he added, noting Isabella's expression, I understand you have built a life here in London. I won't force you to abandon it. I need time to think, Isabella said quietly. 6 months ago, I believed I was nobody. Now I'm a princess and an imperial heir. It's rather a lot to process. Of course, Frederick agreed. Take all the time you need, but know that Valdoria would welcome you with open arms, and I would be honored to have you by my side. That afternoon, Isabella received a visitor she had been expecting, Edmund, arriving without Charlotte, and looking considerably less composed than usual. He was shown into a private sitting room where Isabella waited, Nathaniel standing supportively nearby. Your Highness, Edmund began, then stopped. Isabella, thank you for seeing me. I'm seeing you, so we can have closure, Isabella said directly. Nothing more. Edmund flinched but nodded. I deserve that. I deserve far worse, actually. Isabella, I've spent the past day realizing what a fool I've been. You were everything I should have valued. Intelligent, compassionate, genuine, and I was too blind to see it. I let my mother's prejudices and Charlotte's manipulations convince me that breeding mattered more than character. Yes, you did, Isabella agreed, offering no comfort. And in doing so, you humiliated me in front of all society, destroyed my reputation, and cast me aside without even giving me a chance to defend myself. You believed the worst of me without question, because it suited your purposes. I know, Edmund said miserably, and I can never make that right. But Isabella, if there's any chance, any possibility that you might consider— No, Isabella said firmly, there isn't. Edmund, even if I weren't a princess, even if you hadn't treated me so cruelly, we were never right for each other. You married me out of duty, and I tried to make you love me out of desperation. Neither of us was being honest about what we wanted or needed. And what do you need? Edmund asked, his eyes flickering to Nathaniel. I need someone who values me for who I am, not what I represent, Isabella said. Someone who sees my mind as equal to my appearance, who respects my opinions even when he disagrees, who wants a partner rather than an ornament. I need someone who would have stood by me when I had nothing, not someone who only wants me now that I have everything. The words hung in the air, and Edmund's shoulders sagged in defeat. He's a lucky man, he said quietly, glancing at Nathaniel. Whoever he is. I'm a lucky woman, Isabella corrected, because I finally know my own worth, regardless of whether any man recognizes it. After Edmund left, Nathaniel approached Isabella carefully. That was remarkably gracious of you, considering what he did. It wasn't grace, Isabella replied. It was freedom. I needed to face him and realize that I feel nothing, no anger, no pain, no lingering attachment. He's simply a man who made poor choices, and those choices cost him something valuable. That's his burden to bear, not mine. And what about us? Nathaniel asked softly. Your uncle wants you to return to Valdoria. You have responsibilities there, a future as an empress. Where does that leave a common physician from London? Isabella turned to face him fully. You're not common, Nathaniel. You're extraordinary, and as for where it leaves us— She took a breath, gathering her courage. That depends on whether you'd consider a rather unusual proposition. I'm listening, Nathaniel said, his eyes intent on hers. "I need to go to Valdoria," Isabella began. "I need to learn about my heritage, meet my people, understand what it means to be my uncle's heir. But I don't want to go alone, and I don't want to leave behind the work we've started here, the orphanage, the reform efforts, all of it. What if—" She hesitated, then continued. "What if you came with me? Not as my physician or my employee, but as my partner in every sense of the word. Valdoria needs modern medical facilities, education reform, social programs. We could build something meaningful there together." Nathaniel's expression shifted through surprise, hope, and finally, joy. "Isabella, are you asking me to—" "I'm asking you to marry me," Isabella said clearly. "Not because I need a husband to legitimize my position, I don't. Not because you're of appropriate rank, by society's standards you're not. But because you're the man I love, the man I respect, the man I want beside me as I figure out who I'm meant to be. If you'll have me." For a moment, Nathaniel simply stared at her. Then he laughed, a sound of pure happiness. "A princess is proposing to me. This is possibly the most unconventional thing that's ever happened in my decidedly conventional life." "Is that a yes?" Isabella asked, her heart racing. "That's an absolutely, unequivocally, enthusiastically yes," Nathaniel replied, pulling her into his arms. "Though I should warn you, I have no idea how to be a prince consort or whatever the appropriate title would be." "Neither do I," Isabella admitted, laughing against his shoulder. "We'll figure it out together. We'll probably make mistakes and scandalize people and do everything wrong according to protocol, but we'll do it honestly, and we'll do it together." Their engagement was announced the following week, sending fresh shockwaves through London society. A princess marrying a physician? It was unprecedented, scandalous, and exactly the kind of thing Isabella no longer cared about. Emperor Frederick gave his blessing with enthusiasm, declaring that Nathaniel's character and accomplishments mattered far more than his pedigree. The wedding was planned for a month later, to be held at the Valdorian embassy before Isabella and Nathaniel departed for her homeland. It would be a small, intimate ceremony, nothing like the grand spectacle Edmund and Charlotte were planning. Speaking of which, Isabella heard through Agatha that the Ashford wedding was proceeding, though with considerably less enthusiasm than before. Charlotte had gotten what she wanted, but the triumph had turned to ash in her mouth. She would be a duchess, yes, but everyone knew she was second choice, the woman Edmund had turned to after losing a princess. The whispers that had once targeted Isabella now focused on Charlotte, questioning her character and her methods. Isabella felt no satisfaction in Charlotte's discomfort, only a distant pity. Charlotte had sacrificed her integrity for a title, and she would spend the rest of her life wondering if Edmund truly wanted her, or simply couldn't have what he'd lost. The day before Isabella's wedding, she visited the orphanage one last time before departing for Valdoria. The children gathered around her, some crying at the thought of her leaving, others excited about the letters she promised to send. "Will you forget about us?" little Emma asked, clutching Isabella's hand. "Now that you're a princess?" Isabella knelt down to the child's level. "I could never forget you, Emma. You and all the children here taught me something important, that what matters isn't where we come from or what titles we have, but how we treat each other and what we do with the opportunities we're given. I'm going to Valdoria to help children there, just like I tried to help you here. And Dr. Reed, my husband, will be building a hospital and a school. We're taking everything we learned here with us." "Will you come back?" another child asked. "I will," Isabella promised. "And when I do, I expect to hear that you've all been studying hard and being kind to each other. Deal?" "Deal," the children chorused. That evening, as Isabella packed the last of her belongings, she found the locket she had worn throughout her ordeal. She opened it, looking at her parents' faces with new understanding. They had given up everything, title, position, security, for love and for her safety. They had lived as ordinary people, finding meaning in their relationship and their work rather than in rank or recognition. "I understand now," she whispered to the painted faces. You were showing me what really matters. It just took me a while to learn the lesson." She fastened the locket around her neck, where it would stay, not as a reminder of what she'd lost, but as a symbol of what she'd gained. The knowledge that her worth came from within, not from any title or position society might grant or take away. Tomorrow she would marry Nathaniel. Next week she would sail for Valdoria. But tonight she was simply Isabella, a woman who had been broken and remade, who had lost everything and found herself, who had been cast down and risen higher than she'd ever imagined possible. And that, she realized, was the greatest triumph of all. 8 months after leaving England, Princess Isabella stood on the balcony of the imperial palace in Valdoria's capital city of Kronstadt, watching the sun rise over the mountains that surrounded the valley. The alpine air was crisp and clean, so different from London's coal smoke atmosphere, and the city below was just beginning to stir with morning activity. Behind her, she heard Nathaniel's footsteps. He wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You're up early again. Couldn't sleep." "I was thinking about how much has changed," Isabella replied, leaning back against him. "A year ago, I was standing in a ballroom being publicly humiliated. Now I'm here, in a country I never knew existed, doing work I never imagined possible. It feels like a dream sometimes." "If it's a dream, I hope we never wake up," Nathaniel said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Though I have to say, being married to you is considerably more exhausting than I anticipated. Do you ever stop working?" Isabella laughed. "Says the man who spent yesterday performing surgeries until midnight. We're a matched pair of workaholics, my love." It was true. The past months had been a whirlwind of activity. Isabella had thrown herself into learning about Valdoria, its history, its people, its challenges. The country was small but prosperous, nestled in the Alps with a population of less than 500,000. It had maintained its independence through careful diplomacy and strategic neutrality, but it faced the same social problems as larger nations: poverty, inadequate education, limited medical care for the lower classes. Isabella had immediately seen opportunities. With her uncle's support and Nathaniel's expertise, she had established the Imperial Foundation for Social Welfare, modelled after the work they had done in London, but on a larger scale. They had opened 3 new schools in rural areas, established a modern hospital in Kronstadt that provided free care to those who couldn't afford it, and implemented reforms to the orphanage system that prioritized education and emotional well-being over mere survival. The Valdorian people, initially skeptical of their emperor's long-lost niece, had quickly warmed to Isabella. She spoke their language imperfectly, but enthusiastically, visited even the remotest villages to understand their needs, and worked alongside common people in ways that shocked the traditional nobility. She was not the kind of princess they were accustomed to, and that was precisely why they loved her. "Your uncle wants to see us this morning," Nathaniel reminded her. "Something about an official announcement?" Isabella nodded, a mixture of excitement and nervousness fluttering in her stomach. She had a suspicion about what Frederick wanted to discuss, and if she was right, it would change their lives once again. An hour later, they sat in Frederick's private study, a cozy room filled with books and maps. The emperor looked older than when Isabella had first met him, his health declining gradually despite the best medical care. He smiled at them warmly. "My dear children," he began, "I've been watching you these past months with great pride. Isabella, you've exceeded every hope I had when I brought you here. You've connected with our people in ways I never could, brought fresh ideas and genuine compassion to your work. And Nathaniel, your hospital has already saved countless lives. You've both proven yourselves worthy of the trust I placed in you." "Thank you, Uncle," Isabella said softly. "But I sense there's more you want to say." Frederick nodded. "I'm not getting any younger, my dear. The physicians tell me I have perhaps 2 or 3 good years left. I need to begin preparing for the transition of power, and that means making certain decisions official." He paused, his expression serious. "I want to name you as Crown Princess Isabella, my formal heir and successor. When I'm gone, you will become Empress of Valdoria." Isabella had expected this, but hearing it stated so plainly, still took her breath away. "Uncle, I'm honored. But are you certain? I've only been here 8 months. There must be others with stronger claims, more experience." "There are distant cousins with claims," Frederick acknowledged, "but none with your intelligence, your compassion, or your vision for Valdoria's future. You've already done more for this country in 8 months than they've done in their entire lives. The people love you, Isabella. More importantly, they trust you. That's worth more than any amount of royal blood." He turned to Nathaniel. "And you, my boy, will need a proper title. I'm creating a new position, Prince Consort and Imperial Physician. You'll have authority to continue expanding medical services throughout Valdoria, with full Imperial support and funding. What do you say?" Nathaniel looked at Isabella, and she saw in his eyes the same mixture of excitement and trepidation she felt. "We say yes," he replied firmly. "We'll do our best to serve Valdoria and honor your trust in us." "I never doubted it," Frederick said with satisfaction. "The formal ceremony will be held next month. Representatives from every European court will be invited, including," he added with a slight smile, "England." Isabella's stomach tightened. "Will they come?" "Oh, I imagine they will," Frederick said. "Diplomatic relations and all that. It will be interesting to see their faces when they witness your coronation as crown princess, particularly certain individuals who treated you so poorly." The announcement of Isabella's new position sent ripples through European society. Congratulations poured in from monarchs and heads of state, along with requests for audiences and trade negotiations. Valdoria, previously a minor player in continental politics, suddenly found itself the subject of intense interest. And as Frederick had predicted, the British delegation confirmed their attendance at the coronation ceremony. The list of attendees included several familiar names, among them the Duke and Duchess of Ashford. "You don't have to see them," Nathaniel said as they reviewed the guest list. "We can arrange for you to be occupied with other delegations during their visit." "No," Isabella said thoughtfully. "I want to see them, not because I need closure, I already have that, but because I want them to see what I've become, what I've built. I want them to understand that their cruelty didn't destroy me. It freed me." The coronation ceremony was held on a brilliant spring day, with all of Kronstadt decorated in Valdoria's colours of blue and gold. The cathedral was packed with dignitaries, and thousands of citizens lined the streets to catch a glimpse of their beloved princess. Isabella wore a gown of white silk embroidered with golden thread, the imperial crown of Valdoria resting on her chestnut hair. As she knelt before her uncle and the archbishop, she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, but it was a weight she was ready to bear. "Do you, Isabella Leopoldine, swear to serve the people of Valdoria with wisdom, justice, and compassion?" the archbishop intoned. "I do so swear," Isabella replied, her voice clear and strong. "Then by the power vested in me, and with the blessing of Emperor Frederick, I proclaim you Crown Princess of Valdoria, heir to the imperial throne, protector of the realm." The cathedral erupted in cheers. Nathaniel, standing nearby in his new role as Prince Consort, smiled at her with such love and pride that Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. This was real. This was her life now, and it was more than she had ever dared to dream. At the reception that followed, Isabella moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting congratulations and engaging in diplomatic conversations. She was aware of Edmund and Charlotte's presence, though she didn't seek them out. Let them come to her, if they dared. They did, eventually. Edmund looked uncomfortable in his formal attire, and Charlotte's smile was brittle as glass. They bowed deeply, deeper than they would have bowed to an English duchess, because Isabella now outranked them significantly. "Your Imperial Highness," Edmund said formally, "congratulations on your coronation. Valdoria is fortunate to have you." "Thank you, Your Grace," Isabella replied with perfect courtesy. "I trust you're enjoying your visit to our country." "It's beautiful," Charlotte said, her voice tight. "Quite different from England. So rustic." Isabella smiled. recognizing the barb for what it was, a desperate attempt to diminish what Isabella had achieved. We prefer to call it authentic. Our people value substance over superficial elegance. It's one of the things I love most about Valdoria. And your hospital work? Edmund asked, seeming genuinely curious. I heard you've been quite involved in social reforms. My husband and I believe that true nobility lies in service, Isabella replied, her hand finding Nathaniel's. We've been fortunate to make a real difference in people's lives. It's far more fulfilling than attending endless balls and maintaining appearances. The implication was clear, and Edmund had the grace to look ashamed. I'm glad you found happiness, Isabella. Truly, you deserve it. I know, Isabella said simply. I hope you found the same, Edmund. Though I suspect you're beginning to realize that what you thought you wanted isn't quite what you needed. Charlotte's face flushed with anger, but before she could respond, Emperor Frederick approached with the Austrian ambassador, and Edmund and Charlotte were forced to withdraw. Isabella watched them go, feeling nothing but a distant pity. That was remarkably diplomatic of you, Nathaniel murmured. I was half expecting you to have them thrown in the dungeon. We don't have a dungeon, Isabella replied with a laugh. And besides, they're not worth the effort. They have to live with their choices, and I suspect that's punishment enough. Later that evening, after the last guests had departed and the palace had quieted, Isabella and Nathaniel stood once again on their balcony, looking out over Kronstadt. The city lights twinkled like stars, and in the distance they could hear music from the celebrations still continuing in the streets. Do you ever regret it? Nathaniel asked. Leaving England, taking on all this responsibility, becoming someone you never planned to be? Isabella considered the question seriously. I regret the pain of what happened, she said finally. I regret that people I cared about turned out to be shallow and cruel, but I don't regret where it led me. If I hadn't been cast out, I never would have discovered who I truly was. I never would have found you. I never would have come here and found my purpose. So you're saying that being publicly humiliated and having your life destroyed was actually a good thing? Nathaniel asked with gentle humor. I'm saying that sometimes we have to lose everything we thought we wanted in order to find what we actually need, Isabella replied. I thought I wanted to be a duchess, to be accepted by English society, to make Edmund love me. But what I needed was to discover my own strength, to find work that mattered, to build a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine love. I needed to bloom where I was planted, even when that planting was painful. Nathaniel pulled her close. You know what I love most about you? You turned your greatest humiliation into your greatest triumph. You could have become bitter, could have spent your life seeking revenge or nursing your wounds. Instead, you became someone who helps others, who builds rather than destroys, who leads with compassion rather than cruelty. I had good teachers, Isabella said, thinking of Agatha, of the children at the orphanage, of all the people who had shown her kindness when she had nothing. And I had you, believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere in England, Edmund and Charlotte were returning to Ashford Hall, to a marriage built on ambition rather than love, to a life of maintaining appearances and wondering what might have been. Somewhere in London, children were sleeping safely in an improved orphanage, benefiting from reforms Isabella had initiated. Somewhere in Valdoria's mountains, families were receiving medical care they couldn't have afforded before Nathaniel's hospital opened. And here, in the imperial palace of Kronstadt, a woman who had once been called a fraud and an impostor stood as crown princess, heir to an empire, beloved by her people, and genuinely happy for the first time in her life. Your Imperial Highness, Nathaniel said formally, then grinned. That's going to take some getting used to. You could just call me Isabella, she suggested, or my love. Or that woman who keeps dragging me to ribbon-cutting ceremonies. How about the woman who proved that true nobility has nothing to do with birth and everything to do with character? Nathaniel offered. That's a bit long for everyday use, Isabella laughed, but I'll accept it. As they turned to go inside, Isabella cast one last look at the mountains surrounding her adopted homeland. She thought of the girl she had been, desperate for approval, willing to diminish herself to fit others' expectations, believing her worth came from her position rather than her person. That girl was gone, transformed through fire and pain into someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more capable. The Duke had cast out his poor wife, believing he was discarding someone worthless. Instead, he had freed a princess to find her empire, a woman to discover her strength, and a soul to bloom in soil that actually nourished her growth. And in the end, that was the greatest revenge of all, not hurting those who had hurt her, but becoming so genuinely happy that their opinions ceased to matter. Isabella had found her kingdom, her purpose, and her love. She had found herself, and she had never been richer. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share in the comments where in the world you're listening from. Your support helps these stories reach people who need to hear them. Thank you for being part of this journey.